Baseball Hall of Fame. We got two guys coming in, and I feel like it's the most anticlimactic class we've had. Not anticlimactic, but kind of the weakest class we've had in a while. Lee Smith and Harold Baines. I know here Lee Smith was I don't know if you would call him a formidable reliever / closer back in his time, but he did come into the league at a point where the closer was becoming a thing.
Right.
And he was the initial saves leader in Major League Baseball before Rivera and Trevor Hoffman outright destroyed. Yeah, basically. And then Harold Baines, who had 2,800 hits in his career, and was and there we go, and was a he played for 21 seasons. And there's the argument, and I don't know. There's the argument that he's undeserving to go, and this is more of a popularity contest than anything. But I'll play Ewing and Oakley in this one. But there's the argument that other people have made that he might have hit 3,000 hits if not for the player strikes in 1981 and in 1980 or 81, one of those, or in what was it? Or 1994. Yeah.
What were you thinking? Jeez.
Oh, crap. Okay. So I don't know. How do you guys feel?
I mean, I don't really know these players that well. So
that's another thing. It's not really our time of players. That's another thing.
I mean, I will say this about the Veterans Committee. I'm glad that they've invented it.
Well, this one's actually not the Veterans Committee.
Well, the general concept of being able to go back after the fact.
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot of players that were left out from the initial voting.
This one is called the Today's Game Committee. I mean, I don't...
Basically, for anyone that doesn't know, on a rotating basis...
all right. So my controller died. So, and I don't have the charger.
So, just for anyone that doesn't know, in the past, the Baseball Hall of Fame, you would get a shot. You would have 15 years, so long as you had a certain number of votes from the voters, and if you didn't get in 15 years, you were done. You could never get in. So recently, the MLB has instituted different committees that vote every couple of years.
Yeah.
So you have one for like the 1800s,
right?
For the early 1900s, the 40s, the 50s.
So baseball historians, and writers,
the Negro
players
leagues.
Too. Yeah.
So this today one is from the more recent, like within the past 25 to 30 years. So that's who voted these guys in.
Yeah. So, and I think the argument I mean, maybe it's because we didn't see these guys play. So there is the argument that it was biased by these guys who, saw these guys play. But I don't know. I mean, there's some argument as to guys who are in the Hall of Fame right now, like Bill Mazeroski, like he only got in because he had a game-winning home run in the World Series. But 2,800 hits is not 3,000. But at the same time, I kind of get it because in other leagues, like Pavel Bure, he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He had a pretty short career.
Right.
He was actually one of the first guys to come out of Russia like that, but young. But his career was cut short due to injuries. But he still got into the Hall of Fame based on the body of work that he had and people thinking, well, if he had stayed healthy, he might have been one of the greatest players of all time.
I think part of it, well, for one thing, baseball's a little bit different because as far as I know, it's the only major league that has a minimum time of service requirement.
Yeah.
You have to
10 years, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to play a minimum of 10 years in order to even be eligible. But to your point, there are, like in MLB, there are players that just, they had relatively mediocre or pretty average careers.
Right.
But then they just went on an absolute tear for a few years.
For
like Sandy
5
Koufax.
seasons. Yeah.
He's the poster boy for this. He had a pretty average career, but then there was that 5 to 7 year span.
He's just dominant.
Where he was arguably the best the best pitcher in history. He had 4 no-hitters, tons and tons of strikeouts. But then he retired because he had arthritis in his left arm, his throwing arm. But he's still in the Hall of Fame, even though he was over that 10-year requirement.
Right.
He really was only of any effect for a relatively short amount of time. Or like, Roberto Clemente, not really, because...
Well, he did reach 3,000 and he died.
Right.
I mean, he would have kept playing if he didn't die in the plane crash.
That is true, yeah.
He probably would have had... I mean, at that point, he probably had like 2 or 3 more seasons, and he would have been well past 3,000 at that point. He got 3,000 in his last game of his career. So he's always that mark. It's like, oh, he's at 3,000. He tied Roberto Clemente. But you want to chime in, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, it's very brief. This is more of a position standpoint. I don't really care for any Hall of Fame institution.
Really?
It's not that. Yeah, because the thing is that generations grow and change, and the game evolves different ways with different rules. So I feel like these two, it's just going to be, it's just like the pat on back, make everybody kind of feel good thing. I'm not saying they're not good players, great players, mediocre players. It's just, I always saw that I can understand I'm not a player in the game, so it's going to be different for me on what a Hall of Fame nomination and election would be. It never fit my savvy kind of thing, because the game changes. You generalize it with football, how you can have Terry Bradshaw, be a Hall of Famer. Is it because he's got 4 rings? Is it because he was in the Super Bowl 4 times, when all that stuff? That's what's great. So wasn't Aikman's, but there were still forefronts. But you look at the modern day passers, the guys who are going to go to the Hall of Fame, Breeze, Brady, Rodgers, presumably. It's different statistically. So bringing that to baseball, sometimes it changes. The parks change. They resize things. The skill set too. Back in 10, 15, 20 years ago, what kind of pitchers are out there? How many balls do they have that they can throw?
That's actually. I get you with that, and it kind of goes into the argument about like keeping like Barry Bonds out and Roger Clemens out because of the steroid era, where you're saying, hey, but they were playing in the conditions that everyone else was playing in, and those guys were juicing too, and so.
And look, on a different day and different show, I'll tell you why I think you should put in Barry Bonds. I'll tell you why I think you should put in Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, because you think it might ruin the integrity of the game, but that was 5 to 10 years worth of the game itself. So,
And those guys contributed so much to the. I liked baseball because of Sammy Sosa.
Yeah. Okay, so they took performance-enhancing drugs. Understandably so. So their records are not authentic. I get it. But baseball is a very hard sport for young people, I think, to get interested in if they don't do Little League, T-ball, anything of that nature. But what was always bringing people in 1997, 1998? McGuire and Sosa going at it back and forth. Sometimes it's about, I can understand you don't like the larger-than-life personas, such as, to cross back over to football, Terrell Owens again, blackball for being overly dramatic and kind of a princess.
It's actually funny that you bring up T.O. because the tweet I sent out announcing the show, I used the clip of T.O. Eating popcorn through his helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just always brings it back. That's why I just don't like who you have to pay in the Hall of Fame. And I have personal bias to the Baseball Hall of Fame because, it's a 75%, voting percentage. Guys stay there for 15 years. If they automatically expire, so we're just saying, hey, you're nominated, but you're only going to be nominated for being a great player for X amount of time. So we're, but once you hit year 15, it doesn't matter anymore. No, you can do it continually. You could rechange your scheme. You can let more guys into it, because here's the problem. Now we're getting to the generation of baseball where so many good players are out there. so many good players, and if you just kind of retool your rules, change up your rules a little bit, you won't have these voting committees that will go back. Because imagine it, the players that we have that retired 5 years ago, where they might be 15 years from now, when you have these committees for today's game era, having to go back and guys who got missed out, like Mike Messina, a couple other guys who I don't think are automatic Hall of Fame guys. It's just a stamp for the franchise to make the sport look good, to make beat writers have something to talk
marketing.
about, debate. Yeah, but it's a troll. Like, bringing in basketball, Dwayne Wade is going to retire. We know he's a sure, bound Hall of Famer. But, what's going to be more important to him at the end of his career? Hall of Famer, I got rings. Because I can tell you, there's a lot of basketball players that don't have rings, Reggie Miller being one of them.
That's true. Some players have said I would trade my Hall of Fame position for a ring.
Well, wasn't that LeBron, a guy who knew he was a surefire, modern day Hall of Famer?
Maybe I think even Dan Marino's even said it. So
yeah. Superlatives mean nothing if you don't have something that shows, one, that you earned it, and then two, that you got it, and then three, that you actually contributed. You didn't ride the bench to get it. Some guys will take that though, but others won't. It's like the late timers. For example, Karl Malone going to the Lakers. In that final bit, 2000? Just trying to get a little piece of that pie
chasing.
One last time. It's different. And as a fan, I'd rather see the accomplishments of what you actually played for, because you don't look at a guy and say, oh man, that's great, he's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, he's going to be a Hall of Fame pitcher, he's going to be a Hall of Fame shooting guard. That's never the thing that you see, right? Because as a fan base, you want to see him participate for your team, and it gets you what your city, what your state, what your general sane populace of fans want, and that's a championship.
Right. Okay.
So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, well, congrats to Harold Baines and Lee Smith. It's the thing, we never really saw them. They're not really our generation of players. I'm sure you will feel a lot different when we see. I mean, we've already seen some of our guys going in, but. Like Randy Johnson, we saw him long enough for that. Greg Maddux, Chipper Jones, Derek Jeter's gonna go, Mariano's, all these guys that we grew up seeing are going in now, and in due time we'll see Adrian Beltre and other guys. So, congrats to those guys. So that was the Hall of Fame talk.